It's the other big story taking place, of course, closest to our shores. Analysts expect that South Africa's national budget will be passed following significant consultations among parties within the Government of National Unity. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will today table the 2025 budget for the third time following a protracted standoff over a VAT hike, which National Treasury has since withdrawn. SABC News is watching the story from a number of vantage points. Let's begin with our senior economics reporter, Nompumelelo Siziba, standing by for us in Cape Town. And Nompu, the cold front also making its presence felt there in Cape Town. Hopefully that doesn't freeze any of the processes that we are hoping will unfold over the next couple of hours.
Thanks very much, Ayanda. No, certainly I don't think it will freeze any of the processes. But as you mentioned, we are outside the Cape Town International Convention Centre, where Enoch Godongwana, the Finance Minister, will be tabling, as we dub it now, Budget 3.0 at 2 p.m. Of course, we did broadcast from Cape Town a couple of months ago from the Newminster car park, which is near Parliament, where Budget 2.0 was delivered. We know that it was passed with a small minority in Parliament, but at the end of the day, the Finance Minister decided to withdraw the fiscal framework, as well as the idea of a VAT increase. And they had to go back, that is National Treasury, had to go back to the drawing board. But this time, as you mentioned in the intro, Ayanda, with a lot more consultation, not holding their cards until the last minute and surprising everyone. And just last week, the Deputy Finance Minister, Dr. David Masondo, did indicate that he didn't believe that there was going to be a budget 4.0, which suggests that there's been sufficient consultation. This is going to be a non-dramatic budget event. But of course, for the South African public, we need to hear what the details are, because depending on what the decisions that government has taken, there may be some elements that we don't necessarily agree with. We don't want higher taxes, but at the same time, we don't want cuts to service delivery. We're going to be having rolling coverage here in Cape Town from all angles. I'm going to hand you over to my colleague, Abra Barbia. In the meantime, of course, traditionally, we always get some views and expectations from political parties. Abra, it's over to you.
Nompu, I'm so sorry that you stuck out in the cold, but myself and a whole bunch of MPs, political party leaders, chief whips and financial spokespeople of political parties, we tucked away nice and warm here in the parliamentary studio, SABC parliamentary studio. So I'm going to get straight into it with them, because obviously we have a range of opinions and voices to get through today. First of all, I have the ANC chief whip, Mr. Ndumiseni Mtuli. Thank you so much for your time. Two big things happening in South Africa today: the budget and then the US-South Africa meeting. But let's first get into the budgets, straight into it. Budget 3.0, what are you hoping for?
Well, we're hoping that, firstly, the Minister is going to present a budget not very far from what he presented earlier on, in terms of the focus on the expenditure, on infrastructure, on addressing the weaknesses within the health and the education sector, improving conditions of our security forces, whether the police or the defense force, and most importantly, addressing the major challenge of the infrastructure in the country, which we need to be attended to very effectively to ensure that our ports and our railways are efficient to attract economic growth. Because unless you attend to those issues and those challenges, it will be difficult for you to guarantee an external investment into your own economy, so that you can generate more resources required for you to deliver and understand your activities.
And then, what are your hopes, or, I mean, lots of opinions have been coming through about the outcome of today's meeting. What is the ANC in Parliament hoping for?
Well, we hope that, my own view is that there's a lot of disinformation about what is happening in South Africa. And hopefully for the first time that the two heads of state are going to be under one roof, it will be possible for them to find a point of convergence about the actuality of the situation in the country, not what is being reported in the media and what other people who are not, in my view, very patriotic have conveyed to the media about the conditions in our country. So that opportunity between President Ramaphosa and President Trump, I think it's a golden opportunity for the two heads of states properly to exchange their own ideas and engage one another about the conditions facing the two countries and how the two countries can work together for the betterment of our own people in this country as well as their countries.
Sir, thank you. We'll catch up with you after the speech. Thank you so much. I now have Dr. Mark Burke of the DA, spokesperson on finance for the DA. Dr. Burke, thank you for joining us today. I'm hearing a lot about infrastructure, and lots of parties have also said they don't want to see money being cut from frontline services like health and education and police.
Absolutely. So we need to find ways to try and grow the economy. When we invest in infrastructure, in the short term, that creates opportunities for people to find work, and in the long term, it creates the environment for business to absorb the labor force. So we need to see infrastructure investment protected. At the same time, as part of this budget process, we need to focus on finding the efficiencies in our spending that allows us to regain the trust of South Africans, but also creates what we call fiscal breathing room, or more money to work with come next year, so we don't face down the barrel of another budget crisis.
Now, your party leader, John Steenhuisen, is currently part of the delegation in the US with President Cyril Ramaphosa. Is there anything specific you want to hear come out of that meeting today?
Well, the minister from our side is going to be focused on agri-trade. But if your question is larger than that, which is the whole delegations, it is now high time for us to try and find a transaction that works for both parties. We know that President Trump means business, and we know that while we're there, this is the moment where we try and salvage our trade with that country, which is a big part of our export market.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burke. I will chat to you after the speech. We now have Action SA's Athol Trollop. Mr. Trollop, thank you. It's like a production line. I've got a bunch of parties, so just bear with me, please, colleagues. Straight off the bat, you, I think, are the one who coined the term Budget 3.0. What are your hopes this time around?
Well, first
Can
of
you
all,
just move over this witness?
First of all, it's a record that we're now having 3 budget attempts in just over 2 months. But it appears that there's unanimity now in the Government of National Unity that wasn't there in Budget 1.0 and 2.0. So that unanimity means that no political party in the GNU can use the budget as a lever to try and get more authority or influence in the GNU. And I'm very pleased that that's happened, because this hiatus was caused by the fact that there was division in the GNU. What we want to do, the minister to do, is to take cognizance of the fact that our unemployment is still rising. The last quarterly labour survey showed that our unemployment's gone to 43%. High unemployment rate of youth, qualified youth, graduated youth, is a crisis in this country. And the fact that we're losing 4,000 jobs a day, that means this evening 4,000 more South Africans will go home and tell their families that they have no job, they cannot provide food on the table, and they don't have the dignity of a reliable income. This budget must turn that around. So we want to see a review on expenditure. We want to see the government cut its cloth to what it can afford. And we want the government to lead by example by tightening its belt first. What we also want to see is additional funding for SARS, because they've shown that they're the biggest revenue collectors and they're really good at it. And they can bridge the gap in the budget and the fiscal framework due to the illicit economy in this country. And then we want to see more funding for the NPA so that they can prosecute effectively and put those responsible for crime and corruption, especially, which erodes our fiscus, behind bars. So until that happens, corruption will continue to undermine our economy and prevent foreign direct investment.
And then just briefly, your projections or your hopes for the meeting between President Ramaphosa and Trump later today?
Well, President Ramaphosa has to mend fences. Fences have been broken with some of the countries in the West that have been our biggest trading partners, most benevolent to South Africa. We've got a schizophrenic foreign international policy, and President Trump needs to hear from President Ramaphosa what the relationship going forward is with all South Africans under our Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and the relationship they're going to have with the United States, and to deal with the relationships that we have with some polecat nations in this world. We seem to always want to align with the countries that have got the worst human rights track records, but then we want to estrange partner countries that look after South Africans and our trade.
Thank you so much, sir. And next up, I have Mr. Sinabo Tambo of the EFF. Let me just get my position. Thank you so much for coming in and speaking to us today. I'm just going to get straight into the US question with you first, because the EFF has a lot to say about the current narrative out there in the US about what's happening in South Africa. What are you hoping to hear come out of the meeting this afternoon?
Look, as the EFF, we have taken note of the current dealings that are happening as it relates to the Starlink enterprise of Elon Musk, where we're hearing rumors that there's been assurances that there'll be a workaround for Starlink to operate in South Africa outside of the regulatory requirements that have been put in place by ICASA. Now, this is a bad sign and signals that this meeting is actually a meeting where Cyril Ramaphosa is going to make assurances to the President of the United States outside of a legislative mandate from Parliament. He's going to make assurances as it relates to the Bella Act, to the NHI Act, and to the Expropriation Act, which does not have powers to do so because he has allowed himself to be someone to come and clarify what is happening in South Africa in terms of a non-existent genocide, but also to make assurances that he doesn't have the powers to make as well. The inclusion of Johan Rupert in his delegation is a telling sign, because Johan Rupert has been someone who has been consistently opposed to land expropriation without compensation, and now that the Expropriation Act allows that as a constitutional instrument, he's going to go there to say that it will never happen, and he's the biggest benefactor of unequal land processes in South Africa as well. So we're very skeptical. We expect him to be humiliated, but we are going to hold him accountable when he comes back if he makes any unlawful assurances there.
Back to our budget then. Obviously, you're looking for the pro-poor budget. Your concern is obviously the most vulnerable in society. What do you want to hear come out this afternoon?
Look, the first thing we want to hear is what is the stimulus that is going to be put into the budget to ensure that there's job creation. A lot of the conversation around the budget process this year has been around the VAT increases, which the EFF successfully defeated in Parliament and in the Western Cape High Court. So now we want to hear what is the jobs plan that is going to come from this budget. But critically, we are opposed to any austerity measures. So a lot of the narrative that is going around, and I read quite a disturbing article this morning on the Sunday Times, where Songezo Zibi and Musi Maimane say that we have no option but to cut spending on health, infrastructure and education. That is not true. They led a process where they were claiming a victory that the VAT increases were scrapped due to their intervention and proposals for alternative mechanisms to generate revenue. Where are their proposals? Why are they now coming out to say we have to cut spending on critical frontline services? So we are going to oppose that. We are going to ensure that the approach by the National Treasury and the fiscal framework that is going to be proposed and revenue proposals as well are amended in the Standing Committee on Finance to ensure that the tough fiscal decisions that need to be made do not disproportionately affect the poor. If we're going to make tough decisions, they must impact the corporate sector, which has been absconding on its duties to invest in the South African economy. We must fund SARS to ensure that we curb illicit financial flows and recover the 800 billion revenue that is being lost by companies shifting profits to other nations. And we must introduce a once-off wealth tax to apartheid trusts which accumulated wealth before 1994 and hid that wealth in those trusts post-democracy. So tough decisions must be made, but they must not be made at the detriment of poor people.
Thank you for your time. I now have the IFP, Mr. Nhlanhla Radebe. Sir, thank you again so much for speaking with us. Let me just find my spot. Is this fine, Hubert? Okay, sorry about that. The budget today, your hopes, what are you hoping to hear the minister say third time around today?
Yeah, it's a third attempt, which we hope it's going to be the final one this time around. As the IFP, as a political party that is standing for the poor, the less fortunate and the underprivileged, we are hoping that this budget is going to talk to that, create more jobs, allow service delivery to flow to the outskirts of the country where there is no service delivery. So we hope that today's budget is going to do that, exactly that.
And then, sir, in terms of the meeting later on this evening, late afternoon, with our president and the US president, is there anything that the IFP specifically wants our president to address?
Well, we note the meeting that is going to take place, and we support the initiative as the IFP, and we will continue to support any effort that is aimed at encouraging investors and funders to come to our country. South Africa is a country that still needs more development, infrastructural development. Industries must be encouraged to come to the country so that our people will be able to get jobs.
Thank you so much for your time. We will catch up with you later on at the CTICC after the speech. Thank you for your time, sir. Okay, that's our first batch of political parties giving their views on what they want to hear come out of the budget today. And of course, they will be with us again with my colleagues later on this afternoon. Nompu, I'm going back to you.
Thanks very much, Abra, for those comprehensive reflections from political parties. And so we continue with this coverage outside the Cape Town International Convention Centre. We're going to be speaking to a myriad of experts and economic participants. Namely, at this time, we're going to be speaking to Labour. We're going to get into conversation with Rifta Ajam. She's the General Secretary at FEDUSA. Thank you so much, Rifta, for joining us. So, of course, this is what we're now dubbing as a Budget 3.0. There is only one budget for 2025, of course. The two previous ones were rejected out of hand for various reasons. And now we're hoping that Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana is going to get it right this time in terms of getting support for this particular budget. We know that Treasury has said they're going to be down 75 billion rand over the medium term. That means they need to either cut expenditure or find taxes from elsewhere. Finding taxes from elsewhere is going to be quite difficult. But the other thing as well that's been talked about is the public sector wage bill. Now, we know that the public sector has agreed with government on a mid-term agreement, a 3-year wage agreement. Government reneged on the agreement in 2018, and you guys have very bad memories of that. Any fears and concerns that that might be touched upon this time around?
Good morning to you, Nompo, and to the viewers out there. I believe that we have moved beyond that process and that sanity and level-headedness has prevailed. The levels of trust that we have established now through collaboration, through cooperation, but most importantly, through talking to the parties. In this instance, a number of bilaterals have been had with the Minister, with FEDUSA and other parties involved. But in particular, our discussions in this instance have been extremely fruitful. We have seen beyond that process of 2020, the ugly process, that we've moved beyond, and we believe that to enhance that trust relations, the increase will most certainly be implemented, failing which it will be anarchy. That I can promise you, because we have set the tone, and we believe that to advance the state capacity with the public servants driving that process, it cannot be anything else but implementation.
Now, Rifta, you put out a statement recently about Budget 3.0 that's set to be tabled at 2 o'clock today. One of your major concerns that you've outlined is going back to the old days of austerity. We know that the Budget 2.0, as we call it, the budget of March 12, was very expansive, and that was going to be supported by the VAT increases, which are no longer happening. So therefore, just tell us about your concerns, especially when it comes to the areas of education and health, because that's where more spending was set to take place.
FEDUSA has and will continue to reject any measure of austerity. It has been abundantly clear in the past, and we want to avoid any form of a continuation of austerity. Number one, it erodes all forms of state capacity. It has led to job losses in all forms, and what we want to see is that the poorest of the poor are not going to be disproportionately burdened by being further hampered in this instance. So we want to make sure that education and health in particularly are prioritized, notwithstanding safety and security and many of the other critical public services that are being delivered by our members in the public service. So it's absolutely important that the Minister desists from any form of continued austerity. We want him to focus not just on balancing the books, but allocating strategic resource allocation. And we have seen here that if South Africa needs to be on a developmental trajectory and pathway, invest investment in public resources is going to be absolutely important. The future of our children hinges on that. We cannot continue to have the deplorable state of infrastructure in our hospitals. We have seen what has happened just recently in the media at Prince Mashieni Hospital in KZN as a result of burnout because of lack of resources, not just human resources, but others in particular. So there has to be a reset and a rethink in order to take us onto a new pathway.
Very quickly, Rifta, just in terms of, we've got our eyes on two things, today's budget and the meeting between President Ramaphosa and President Trump. Are you concerned that South Africa could end up giving away some of its sovereignty as it deals with the United States? We've heard already that there may be some concessions for Elon Musk's Starlink, which means bypassing the BEE laws, and people have concerns about that. What are your hopes, in terms of what comes out of that meeting?
Well, we must certainly hope that sanity will prevail. You are dealing with two sets of, if I can say, evils here now, in lack of where we want to be positioning South Africa. We understand what the President of the US has on hand, and that is ultimately protecting the interests of the United States. And similarly, President Ramaphosa has got an obligation to South Africa to protect South African interests. What we are saying here, it has to be a balanced approach when we take into account we cannot compromise to the extent that workers and businesses are going to be compromised. So we are hoping that some of the small sacrifices that are going to be made is not going to have a big impact on the country as a whole. When it comes to South Africa, there's been many conversations, but ultimately we must keep the conversations flowing to understand the facts that are at hand here now, and not, unfortunately, some of the misconceptions and the misinformation that has beclouded some of the conversations that have been had up north. But I believe that with the delegation that is in the US at this stage, we will be able to advance on those talks and restore some of the relations that we have. Workers in particular can't afford to forego some of the key policy directives that are at hand at this stage.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, for example, you talk about workers, and of course we have a lot of international companies invested in South Africa, US companies included. We just heard that Nissan may be thinking about shutting down one of its plants in Roslyn, which is a concern because that speaks directly to jobs and so on. How concerned are you about the deindustrialization in South Africa?
It's a major component of absolute concern. At certain stages, there's panic because we understand that there has been some good relations, especially in the motor industry. One of Fiducia's larger affiliates, the Motor Industry Staff Association, is currently looking at exploring alternate avenues at the same time. But we have to get it right. It's about reindustrialization, not deindustrialization. We are looking at the green economy and the future of the automotive sector, especially electric vehicles, but we are not ready as a country yet to be able to move or convert fully to that particular trajectory. So for now, it is important that Minister Park-Stow and the cohort within NEDLAC and everyone around the table comes together, regroups, because the emergency and the urgency of the situation continues to remain. So the conviction that we had during COVID-19, the existential threat, must continue to resurface now because our industries and our manufacturing capacity and the capability must be reignited in South Africa, not just within the Trade and Industry Chamber, within NEDLAC, but within all spaces. We need to take hands. We have to continue to collaborate on those areas to ensure that we advance the manufacturing capacity, not just at that level when it comes to the motor industry, but in all industries in South Africa, so that we can enhance the growth path, so that we see growth in terms of jobs and not jobless growth, which we have seen for far too long in South Africa.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you one last thing. Labour is rightly or wrongly accused of safeguarding Labour's interests and not those of the unemployed. What do you think government needs to be doing for the unemployed?
Well, I think that is an absolute misconception that we have to rectify, Nompu. When we speak about workers overall. When we articulate the position, we speak about those that have been abjectly affected by what is happening in terms of unemployment and the knock-on effect of inflation. And the VAT conversation that was had during Budget 1.0 and 2.0. So it is absolutely incorrect to say that we are safeguarding our own interests. If that was the case, why did we fight for the transport sector, the taxi industry during COVID-19 in particular? FEDUSA continues to articulate the fact that ministers should not be removing the social relief of distress grant. That should be translated into a basic income grant. So in this way, we are trying to assist. We want to give society at large the economic freedoms as well to be able to contribute towards this economy by being in jobs, by having work and contributing to the tax base. But it is absolutely incorrect to say that we are gatekeepers and we are only safeguarding our own interests now. Not at all. We are there to fight for those who are impoverished. We are there for those who are unemployed, who have had to make the ultimate sacrifice as a result of privatization and the very austerity measures that you have spoken about earlier on. So no, unfortunately not. That conversation has to be shelved.
All right, Rifta, I think you've been heard. Thank you so much for speaking to us. That was Rifta Ajam, the General Secretary at FEDUSA, saying that they're not gatekeepers of only Labour. They care about all South Africans. I think we are now going to head back to studio to Ayanda. Back to you, Ayanda.
That's right. Nompumelelo Siziba, live to us there from Cape Town as we watch this big story from a multiple vantage points. Nompumelelo, for now, thanks very much indeed.